We start off with Draven moving first, swinging his axe to meet Trundle's club.
With who swinging their axe?
Draven.
Darius. It's the wrong brother, fool.
We were just talking about,
I know.
This is
I
your
know.
fault.
I know exactly what I did.
Welcome to Casuals of Runeterra. I guess it's a special episode as well, so we probably lied and said the last episode was the last special one. We had a cinematic come out. Welcome to Noxus. I am your host, Ryan, here with the other host, Tetch.
That's right. We're the casuals of Noxus now. Right? And this is where we're going to start playing like our communist music right here.
So housekeeping up top. You can listen to us everywhere. We appreciate those who listen to us everywhere. We definitely do. You can visit us at podcastcore.com for all of our info. You can email us at podcastcore@gmail.com. You can follow us on all the platforms. That helps us with discoverability. We don't have any sponsors or anything at the moment, so we appreciate that. Leave a like and comment wherever you listen the most. And the easiest way, word of mouth. Tell a friend to learn to square up and throw hands by listening to the Casuals of Runeterra podcast.
This episode is brought to you by Nuck If You Buck.
Don't make me put that in the background for the next part of them. Don't make me do it.
This is how we're going to get around the loophole of lying to our audience about our last episode being the last special episode, is that we're just going to get it copyright struck off of YouTube.
So, a little thing up top before we hop into it. We don't have to rush. This won't be as long as, I think, our longest episode, which was the episode 9 of Arcane Season 2 coverage.
Oh, boy.
But we want to talk about the title and choice of marketing. So if you've Hedge and I have talked about this off the cast, maybe we've talked about it on it as well, but we had a concern with how they would, quote unquote, like franchise these properties, right? As far as how do you represent League of Legends as you move to different regions to the general audience who doesn't know these regions, who doesn't know what's going on, because they started with the show being called Arcane, right? League of Legends in little small font. It wasn't League of Legends Arcane. So we thought, okay, well, if you go to a new region, what are you going to call it? Just keep calling it Arcane because that's the branding, right? People familiar with it. When people talk about it, that's what they go to. They didn't do that. Then we thought, okay, we'll call it League of Legends Presents X. They didn't do that either. So when this trailer came out, Hetch and I had the same response because it's been a while. It's been like 3 weeks. We know we're late. We're taking our time. We're geriatrics. Okay.
That's right. We're old men. All right. We're going on our time and you're stuck with it.
That's our advice to you youngins. Slow down. So they just called it Welcome to Noxus, and then the title was Bite Marks featuring Taya, a split 2025 Season 1 cinematic, League of Legends at the end. And when we tell you it was opposite day,
man, it was opposite of opposite day at one point. It was ridiculous. I just do not understand why in the world we, as far as like League of Legends as a marketing team, has just gone absolutely AWOL when it comes to this property, because it really is just logically makes sense. Arcane, it's perfect. Everything in like lore specifically, everything in Runeterra is affected by the Arcane in some way, whether people realize it or not. And the fact that it started in Piltover and Zaun really shone a light on that principle, because this is the steampunk city. This is the city of progress. This is where science rules. And it shows immediately how a scientific nation was affected by the Arcane in the world of Runeterra.
Yeah.
We also have other American media, uh, popular media that uses the same title despite telling different stories.
Mhm.
As if anyone's ever seen an American Horror Story, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
True Detective.
They use the same cast over and over again. It's okay. You could just call it Arcane, but no. Instead, we now have a 5-minute excerpt at the start of our episode going, we have no idea. We had no idea what that cinematic was about when it first dropped, just like
Yeah.
everyone else.
And it also happened to coincide with the beginning of the new League of Legends game season as well, which confused people because Mel is also a character now. So I was like, okay, well, is this like just a trailer for that? Is this a skin situation? Is this something different? Like, is this a music video? Because it's labeled like a music video. So
Um,
like,
and and at the point of recording, like Taya did actually drop like a music video
yep,
for bite marks.
yep. I
So,
listen. The
what
thing that
is
saved
this?
them ultimately here was the timing. Because if they would have waited a couple months and did this, I think it would have had a impact on people being as confused as we were, because everyone was confused, but they dropped it right after season 2 ended. So that helped a lot, right? That helped a lot where people immediately were able to make a connection because of that.
Yeah. And but that is relying entirely too much on the audience
Yeah.
and entirely too much on context clues. This could
Yeah.
have been just so much clearer. It
Yeah.
it, it didn't have to be this difficult, especially if we just kept to a simple naming format. Because it even says the 2025 season.
This is like Microsoft's naming formats when it comes to consoles. All right, enough of us ranting. We have more to rant at the end in our discussion section, but story best told in 3 parts. So we start with Mel arriving at the shores of Noxus. And immediately I thought about the regional aspect, right? We'd like to talk about the maps, we like to talk about the geography. And from Piltover, I guess she went out of the port to the north of Piltover and then sailed to the eastern shores of Noxus. So she sailed west to get to the eastern shores of Noxus. That's kind of what I'm expecting.
And as far as like us coming to that conclusion, we are straight up looking at the map. Like this is if you go
Which
to
could be
League of
retconned.
Legends,
We don't know
it,
yet.
yeah, of course it could be retconned. I mean, look at Victor's lore now. Like so we're going off of like the current map, what it is still currently on the League of Legends website,
Yeah.
circa 2025.
Yeah.
So
Made in
we
WordPress.
if we're still alive and we can come back to this episode in like 5 years, maybe we'll laugh at ourselves. Who knows? Um, but that is the info we're working with right now.
Yeah, and then we get the music start to play, the song Bite Marks from Taya, and then we see a mysterious meeting of masked figures. And most likely these are like a Black Rose related, some type of, high aristocrat meeting. And then we get a shot of Darius, which is redesigned to be, he looks a bit slimmer, more realistic in proportions, if you want to call it that. And he's walking through a regiment of soldiers to meet a waiting Trundle. And we know this for sure that this is Trundle. We know trolls can look alike and very similar. But we know due to a follow-up scene we'll talk about in a bit. And one thing we want you to notice is that this fight setup is very similar to the duel between Ambessa, Caitlyn, and Mel. So we see that the traditions of Noxus carry over to the mainland.
And it's really nice as far as seeing like all of the these new, not necessarily new characters, but new for the Fortiche team characters. It's nice to see their representation for these characters because like Trundle just looks like Trundle. Darius does not look like Darius. But this is kind of like, for me, it's giving flashbacks to like the act one of season one of Arcane. Because Caitlyn and Jace and Victor, you look at their characters, like compared to what they are in the game, you look at them in act one of Arcane to what they ended up being at the end of the season. It's like, okay, it's going to be very interesting to see like what Darius is going to look like towards the end of Fortitia's representation of Noxus, because he looks like a kid in
Yeah,
this,
he looks
like
young.
comparative to his end game model.
Mhm.
But like it'd be like me looking at a picture of me in my mid 20s, being like, "Oh, look at this baby." That's kind of the feel that I get with it.
They even gave him a distinct accent on his hair where he has like this gray streak. It's not super prominent, but it definitely stands out to because his eyebrows have always been his giveaway, right?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so they added a bit to him to give him a bit more character than just being kind of a brute, right?
God, if his eyebrows are his giveaway, what's Draven's?
Oh, his mustache.
Ah, damn
Yeah,
you for
he has kind
finding
of
a
like the Fu
simple answer.
Manchu variant going on.
He does. I didn't want you to give a simple answer. It was just a joke on his eyebrows, you son of a bitch.
So to wrap up part one, we go back to a scene in this mysterious gathering, and one of the patrons attempts to secretly attack another, but then they're parried, and the attacker space is revealed to be who we know as Katarina. And we called this, right? If you listen to our episodes way back, we wanted this for one. We wanted Katarina to be a big player because of her family, because of her background, because of her connections to Garen. Go listen to our Katarina episode. Go listen to all of those episodes that are related to, I mean, even our Noxus episodes, we bring up Katarina a good bit because in game, she's kind of a plain character, right? She doesn't stand out too much. But when it comes to the lore and the politics of Runeterra, she is important. So we're glad that they picked her as one of the mains. And then we get to see who blocked the the attack because it wasn't the person being attacked, and who protected this target. And they proceed out of the shadows on spider legs, and is revealed to be Elise, once again redesigned.
All right. So there have been a lot of memes already based on like the redesign of Elise here. I'm not even going to touch the memes because the memes are they speak for themselves. Go enjoy the internet. But this was honestly a big surprise to me because we talked about Katarina a lot because especially the position that her family has in Noxus, it sets her up to be a wonderful character to serve as a pivotal part of the story because it reaches all levels of Noxus. Whereas Elise's story is very unique for Noxus, like within the shell of Noxus. It's a very unique story. So this is a very refreshing surprise to have because this is touching more on the arcane side of Noxus. And I was kind of afraid that we would only get the Black Lotus representation of the arcane,
Yeah.
but it goes so much deeper than that in the lore. So it's really nice to see that they are addressing that, and they given us a whole new fresh look at Elise with it too. Yeah, sign me up. I'm all in.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how she plays into things because if you've listened to our Elise episodes, you know that she more is represented on the Shadow Isles type of thing and more represented as the abomination side of herself rather than this human side and her involvement. Yeah, it's gonna be that. So at least we know. It's like with Victor, we were kind of surprised by the route they took, right? Even though we enjoyed it.
Yeah.
With Elise, they're kind of showing up front. Hey, this is probably going to be a Victor situation.
Yeah.
A lot of this is going to
And
shift.
And this is great because this opens a door for Marcus to formally be introduced into the lore. And
Oh yeah,
Marcus being the 1/1 from the card game.
yeah, yeah.
Elise, where are you?
So part two is mainly going to be some Sakuga because it's kind of formatted like a movie trailer, or not a movie trailer, but like a music video, right? Like they've done in the past. So it kind of makes sense. And the Sakuga we get to start things off here is Draven versus Trundle. And it's so obvious. They cut the music out here, which is something that makes us even more confusing about like what is this thing? Is it the music video? Is it not the music video? What's going on? But let's get into it. So we start off with Draven moving first, swinging his
Yeah.
axe to meet Trundle's club.
With who swinging their axe?
Draven.
Darius.
Darius.
It's the wrong brother, fool.
We were just talking about, you know,
I know.
This is
I
your
know.
fault.
I know exactly what I did, and I apologize for
not
nothing.
Draven, Darius swings his axe first, meets Trundle's club, and then immediately the club's true ice, because if you listen to our Trundle episodes, you understand that. And then Draven drops his axe because he's like, well, shit, this is useless. So then he goes for this WWE Goldberg spear on Trundle, which is an interesting choice. I don't know if it's the most intelligent choice. Trundle stops his momentum with his body, drops his club, picks Darius up, drops him, and then slams him and immediately gets into his full guard. And they tussle around the ground for a bit, and Trundle begins ripping off pieces of his armor with his mouth, which is interesting.
We as a community, we had a lot of fun with Victor, Jace, and Arcane, and then making a lot of memes of like, yo, I don't know what this is, but it's a lot gayer than the lesbian sex scene with Kate Mai. And then here's Fortiche being like, what if Trundle would undress Darius with his teeth? Like, it was choices were made.
Yeah, choices were made. And then Darius stumbles to regain his footing while Trundle is still like grabbing pieces of his armor, pulling it off as he's running away. A very barbaric way to fight, but it's a frost troll. It makes sense. So then they re-engage. Darius gets like 2 right hooks to the body of Trundle, but misses the third one as Trundle steps back. Trundle misses a wild overhead left hook, but catches Darius with the right hook, and that knocks him out for a little bit. Or actually, you know what? He takes it. to think about, because during this whole time, you have Trundle trying to like get a grip on him again, and he's just kind of going at the body. But this does stagger Darius a bit. He then recovers immediately and surprises Trundle with a clean right uppercut. Trundle eats that and then follows up with a left club to Darius's back and then a right club that once again hits him in the face, staggers him again. He grabs Darius's head and attempts to essentially pull it off like a doll. Like he grabs his shoulder, grabs his head, and starts wrenching it. And Darius is straining to keep his head on. And slowly during this time frame, he's reaching for that axe that's now covered in true ice. Then he finally gets a grip on it, fights the biting cold going up his arm, and he puts all of his remaining power into this upper swing that shatters on the jaw of Trundle and knocks him out cold. Or is he dead? We don't know.
Yeah, like as far as like the representation for like the end of the fight, it is left very ambiguous, which I think is clearly done on purpose here because we're not going to have a trailer for the next season killing off immediately a named character, and not only a named character, but a named character for a region that we don't have a show in yet.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
this would be the same as just like, here's a trailer and Jarvan the Fourth is dead. That what? Like that's the same level that we're talking about here. So I think it's very much on purpose how ambiguous this is, and I think that it's also like kind of important to really hone in on the fact that like Darius looks very different. And I talked about earlier, like how he kind of looks like a kid version of what we see in the game. which is very akin to like Jason,
Yeah.
Victor, and Caitlyn in the first season of Arcane. This is setting up a story. Like I think reading too deep into it and trying to figure out if he's is he dead, is he not, all that is missing the point of just like, hey, Darius, we're gonna learn more about his campaign in Freljord. That's what's important here.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of what Hetch is pointing out here is essentially, hey, they're hinting at a timeline here where they're placing us at the time Mel gets to Noxus, right? Because Mel's not an original, or Mel is not an OG lead character, right? So she's an implant into the story. So she can't give us any hints to where we are at what point in time. And she's what we're using as a vehicle to get to Noxus. So when we get there, they have to let us know what is the time frame in Noxus, because Noxus dictates, like, the time frame in Noxus is very important, to let us know what's going to happen next.
And it's very important to have these context clues to put in the time because look at the other named characters that we have.
Yeah.
Elise, a monstrous abomination that's been around for centuries. LeBlanc, who knows how long LeBlanc's been around. Vladimir, a monstrous abomination who's been around for millennia,
Yeah.
not centuries,
Yep.
millennia. So it's really difficult to use to them of like,
Great
here's
point.
where we're starting our story.
Great point. Great point. So that's pretty much part two. This takes us to part three here, where the music returns. Because, and that's, it adds a lot to that fight, because two things here. First of all, it shows that they've improved on their technique. Their technique was already great. And this is something I want to hear Hetch talk about now rather than later. So that's why I'm interrupting. Is, Hetch was very clear and upfront about him not liking this style of animation, like the first season of Arcane, but he loves the content, he loves the characters, he loves the production and the touch they put on it. So he was able to, tamp that down in his distaste. They made him a fan, right? And with this update, clearly on the animation, the style, and everything, while maintaining the stylistic choices. What did you think about, like, so far? Like, how this? I mean, this fight's a great example of the upgrade.
No, I mean, this is really just kind of putting in like a very small moment as far as showing off like how much Fortiche has grown, specifically
Mhm.
the team working on Arcane. Because a thing that I did not take into account going into Arcane season one, because again, I will still say I'm not a big fan of like the more cell shaded look,
Mhm.
and I discounted effect that animation has on the storytelling
Mhm.
aspect. And that is something that I definitely have eaten crow over as well as just turned around my perspective on because the storytelling in Arcane is incredible visually.
Yeah.
They do a good job of telling not just the main story, but giving context clues for the background stories, just using the animation and the art. And this, especially like the fight between Darius and Trundle, like it really sets it up well, especially the way that they're depicting the true ice's effect on Darius, on both his equipment and just himself, just in a short little cinematic. And then like combining that with the other tools at their disposal, like the music, cutting in and cutting out, like that really does a good job of just like kind of refocusing your attention because you're basically watching a music video and then all of a sudden it's not a music video. It's Darius fighting for his life, and then like they pull you right back out of it using the music to suck you out. It's like they've done a good job of using all of the tools to where just the specific art style and like the physical look of it is no longer important because it's bigger than itself. So this really just does a good job of just kind of setting it all up because even while I was confused of is this a trailer for the next show or is this just League of Legends talking about the new season of the game, even within that confusion I was still fully wrapped up in the video, and that's a good thing. Like it should draw your audience in and it should keep their attention. and my attention never left.
I want to take this moment. I don't think we've mentioned on this show because Arcane wasn't out back then, but Mother's Basement on YouTube, Jeff Thu, who he mainly covers animation and anime, but he has a video called CGI Phobia, and I recommend anyone who has, our age that has gone through the phase of rough 3D in animation and how it's grown and its importance. It was a video that I mentioned at Hatch and we've talked about that I changed my view on as Hetch pretty much broke down 3D's place in animation and what it allows us to express story wise, and it being more than just what it is, right? It's what it brings and how it's used, as Hetch mentioned, a tool. And yeah, I'm happy to hear him say everything he just said. So let's do it. Let's get to the part 3. Music comes back, and it's good music. And Mel is at some ancient part of Noxus now, some historical place. And then we cut back to Katarina beginning to battle Elise. Some more, Sakuga here. And it's a flourish of blades, which represents Katarina's toolkit, and Spider Silk, which is Elise's toolkit. And she's able to kill her original target, kind of smirks at least when she does it. Then we cut back to Mel, who's ambushed by what looks like blood mages. Now, I'm not going to use their actual term in Runeterra because I will mess it up. If you've listened to our Vladimir episode or any of those, and I had to say it a million times, you understand why. We're calling them blood mages. They're blood mages.
No, this is what, like, now I am just, like, my headcanon isn't that you just are struggling with saying the word. It's just you're a hemophiliac. And that, like, this is now just like a personal hatred.
Listen, I already screwed up the two brothers for the major scene. I refuse to do it again.
So what was your favorite scene with Shaco in this video?
I have character blindness where no matter what character's on screen, I only see Shaco. So this takes us to back to the scene with Katarina, and Elise climbs up the wall and transforms into her true spider form, which looks pretty similar to what we expect. So, like, her human form has been redesigned. Her spider form kind of looks what we expect because it's a spider, right? Like, you can't really, they didn't add any legs or anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice though that, like, they showed as far as, like, how this face is going to look like on the original spider form, which is nice. I think I personally would have preferred more of, like, just like outright spider. But this is also coming from someone who really likes the interpretation of Shelob and the Lord of the Rings fandom. So, especially, like, the way the media transitioned to show Shelob, it's like, no, give me that. But I'm happy with this. Like, Elise looks great, and even the little bits that we got with this fight, like both like Elise's representation in it and the way they showed, like, Katarina, like. The use of, like, her shunpo and, like, how it's matching up with the dance that's going on in the environment was absolutely sick. So,
dude, Fortitude just popped off, and this is just a trailer. Like, they're cinematic.
They've earned 2 of every penny that they earned. Like, I don't think they're getting paid enough officially.
Yeah, and we know, with the fandom, especially from our data, how well our Rek'Sai episode did, which was very Monster Girl related, if you listen to it. Boy. Listen, we're just as surprised as you are, but people are going to be pleased with Elise in this show.
Oh, yeah. And let me tell you, again, fan art, y'all just do your thing, and I'm going to continue enjoying the internet.
So then we get a shot of Darius holding his arm, his injured hand, which is still covered in true ice. I don't know. It's his gauntlet on his hand, so we don't know if that's going to play into anything. But it's him looking out into a crowd of onlooking trolls that were respecting the fight, just like the Noxian soldiers were respecting the duel. And that gives us a bit more about, Trundle's probably just knocked out, right? He's probably not dead. But then we swap back to Mel, and she flashes back to reality, and it seems like this blood mage fight was possibly a premonition of some sort that comes along with her new powers and being back in Noxus. And then she proceeds through this gate towards Noxus in the distance. So we get a little silhouette of what Noxus looks like, and in the middle of it looks like a possible interpretation of what the Immortal Bastion looks like.
And it's very exciting as far I can't wait to get more details as like what the Immortal Bastion is going to look like,
Yeah.
because this is really more of a teaser
Mhm.
of like what modern day Noxus looks like.
Yeah.
And but we do get the context clue of what this next season's really going to focus on, which I think is going to be more of like a centuries old fight
Yeah.
instead of a millennia one, because she's clearly fighting off blood magic. Like, so we definitely have a good bit of the Crimson Order
Mhm.
representation here, but we're not seeing, despite that this is being triggered by what looks like an an ancient structure or a ruin that she's walking through. We are getting the vibes that this is not going to go far enough back to involve Mordekaiser, at the very least, not off right off the bat. Like we're going to be dealing more with like the Crimson Order and what Vladimir's been up to instead of this big old threat of Mordekaiser. That maybe that's down the road. Maybe we're not going to tackle it in the story. We don't know yet.
Oh yeah, Hetch and I we'll have episodes where we talk about how to represent historical events. Hetch and I have already had heated discussions about this, so that should be fun content. But we wrap up this cinematic. We get to see LeBlanc once again redesigned, and she's looking at something, and then Vladimir walks in, as Hetch mentioned, also redesigned to look suspiciously like Asterion, which is a smart move by Riot and very obvious. I think most people made that conclusion. We're not the first. Trust us.
No, like it is. How better of a representation of the success of a game can you have than other properties starting to rip you off?
Yeah.
Because hey, Baldur's Gate 3 is great if you haven't jumped in on that yet. um, but I mean, it is really cool as far as seeing Fortitia's translation of Vladimir here, and I love what they did with LeBlanc.
Hmm.
Like LeBlanc looks really damn good. And not just me being gross. I just mean that like this is their translation of LeBlanc into this universe is phenomenal, and also getting to see like the way that they are viewing everything here is really neat to see because it's giving us an insight into the Black Rose that we've never seen before, but also not answering a single question
Yeah.
that you could have about it because they're just looking at a wall. It's just a
Yeah.
wall. But then LeBlanc does some weird magic, and all of a sudden there's a lot of information up there that we can't comprehend. So this was a really cool way to introduce that. Not only that LeBlanc and Vladimir are going to be playing roles in the next story, but also like just how far spread their reach is without giving away anything of what could possibly be in store for us.
Yeah. So obvious shout out to Larian Studios, right? Another badge on your chest that's earned here. So we get a little bit of dialogue between the two. Vladimir mentions, all this chaos lately that's been happening with the Black Rose, has the Black Rose has encountered and talks about seeking an opportunity within it all, right? He talks about an opportunity coming to their shores within Mel, because remember, Mel's powers are based around involvement with the Black Rose to some degree. We didn't get much about that. We talked about that in the review episodes, but we will, obviously, based on this dialogue. So, he's concerned, but LeBlanc isn't. She's like, I've been around forever. Black Rose has been around forever. We've seen everything. We've done everything. We've been a part of everything. And listen to our Black Rose episodes. But then she mentions that their next move must be bolder and not safer. And that's where this cinematic ends, which is an interesting way to put it, right? Because if we know anything, the Black Rose takes calculated risk. They don't put themselves in any situation where they could lose all of their tendrils and everything. So what does she really mean by bolder?
And For anyone who has listened to our show, you already have an idea of what I'm going to be saying here, which is that we talked a lot as like not only within the shell of Arcane, but we talked a lot about like what we would like to see in the MMO, what we wanted to see like in the first season of Arcane, and how that could translate to a bigger show. Whenever we talk about Noxus, we talk about the same thing, which is the overthrowing of Borum Darkwill. And a coup is not a small thing, even for even for an organization like the
America.
Black
Oh,
Rose.
sorry.
Oh,
Whoops, my bad. Wrong podcast.
bro, bro, we are too early in this presidency to be talking like that on a recording. But that joke aside, like the Borum Darkwill coup would be the natural place to jump off. At least that's what we've been saying for years
Yeah.
now, and that's a very bold thing because there's no way that Borum Darkwill got into power without the Black Rose, not necessarily being involved, but without their permission.
Yeah.
Right. Like even if you don't need their involvement, you still need the green light. So that would be a very bold move, and just from our knowledge of the lore, it totally makes sense that is where we're going to go. The only reason I'm not 100% sold on it is Mel. Mel is the wild card here, not only because of what her magic potentially means for the Black Rose. We don't know where she fits in this story. We still aren't 100% sure where she fits in the timeline. Because sure, Darius on the front lines of war, you could argue is before the coup. Noxus hasn't changed that much under Swain.
Yeah.
It's just more of like political stability within Noxus, not necessarily within all of their held colonies. Mm-hmm. They're still fighting all the time under Swain. So that Darius fighting Trundle doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a Borum Darkwill coup. So who knows what that could mean? And Mel is the wild card that's going to lead us into that answer. So I'm very curious to see, like, are we going to see a very large change to multiple characters' lores like we saw with the first 2 seasons of Arcane? Or are we going to see how their new representations fit into the lore that we already know?
Amazing point. Yes. Hatch nailed it. I have no notes. I mean, I have notes, but like no additional notes.
Thank you.
So now we're into this. I mean, that leads us perfectly in our discussion section of some things we want to talk about. So the first thing is 172 million views at the time of this recording, which is insane considering them essentially putting hurdles in their way, as we talked about at the top of the show. They tried their hardest to make sure no one saw this fucking cinematic. But without that, like, people were immediately clamoring for this. And that just shows, we talked about the hunger after season 1 of Arcane. Obviously, after season 2, it was palpable. So the timing was damn near perfect. And this is the reflection of that.
Yeah. And it's really nice to see such a big reception because we are like talking borderline like K-pop numbers. Like we're talking K-pop numbers, but we're talking Twice, not Blackpink.
Yeah.
And definitely not BTS.
Let's not do this.
All right?
Let's not do this.
I'm throwing a coup over this podcast.
Save it for our next KD episodes when the new music drops. We'll go down that route.
You're right. I'll hold off for my girls. But
the girlies are fighting.
Yeah, just the overwhelming success as far as this debut and the number of eyes that have seen it really bodes well for the future of I'm not giving in to you, Riot. I'm still going to call it Arcane. So for the 3rd season of Arcane, the hype is very much well and alive. Yeah. But just because this has been received very well and it is making a lot of traction doesn't mean it's answered the question of what is it? Like, are we getting the next season right away? Like, is that what that is? Or is it just season 2025 for the video game?
So great point.
What is it?
That brings us to the title again, where it does say 2025 season 1. So does that mean it's dropping this year, or is that just a general idea of, hey, you're not getting another cinematic? Because if they release a second cinematic, wouldn't that also be 2025 season 1? Once again, Riot, what the fuck were you doing?
And also, why did you say season 1 if it's just the video game? Why would you say season 1? Because it's not season 1 of League of Legends.
So yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see what they do there. But let's hop into the main characters, main players that we now have a list of. We doubt they, especially if you leave them out of this, there may be one surprise character. I mean, being Swain, but not even a big surprise. But what we've seen is Mel, Darius, Katarina, Elise, LeBlanc, Vladimir, and Trundle. So, is there anything about any of those that you saw here where you're like, ooh, this seems different, or this is something I'm interested in?
Uh, well, as far as like the first thing that popped up in my head with seeing this trailer was that the big surprise was Swain's absence, because especially for Arcane
Absence
fans,
in quotes.
yeah, quote, unquote. But everyone was already on a big hype train with the second season of Arcane and the imagery that Mel was getting in her visions in the show involving ravens. So the fact that we were getting all this pro Swain imagery was what already drummed up the hype that we were going to go to Noxus. Like, so this getting a cinematic for Noxus necessarily wasn't a big surprise. Just with all the titles in it, that was a big surprise. But the big surprise with the players that were here for me was Trundle, and not Trundle the character, more a Freljord champion. That was the big surprise, because we have talked at length about how cool it would be within the storytelling elements of Arcane, and especially with how well of a job Fortiche did of presenting a lot of political issues, how big it would be to go over, Swain and his coup in Noxus and the effects that it has on Ionia.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, it seemed very natural to go to Ionia because that's where you've got a lot of your big name money making characters like Akali and Ari, just looking at League of Legends through that lens. So going to Freljord, that's something that we wanted. It's something we really want, but it was a big surprise to actually see that in the teaser for this, like to show that it's like, hey, we're potentially going to be talking about the Noxian front in Freljord. And that opens a door to a lot of other possibilities, like with Ashe and her pursuit to unify Freljord, going up against the Winter's Claw and Sejuani. And we had a really fun episode talking about what Sejuani and Udyr are up to and the effects that could have on the Freljord. So all of a sudden, these doors could potentially be open. At the very least, the guardrails keeping us away from the doors, they've been removed. But we don't know if the doors are locked yet or not. So that was the big surprise for me, was that we got a look at the Freljord in this lens. I thought it would be at least 5 years before we could potentially talk about what the Freljord would look like through Fortiche's eyes. So to get that look was awesome. That was a huge surprise, and it was a breath of fresh air for me.
I agree. Same answer. Fortiche basically looked at us and said, "Hey, we're crazy. We'll do anything."
Watch like we actually get like, just a teaser with the proper name of the show, and then like the last like Easter egg that they give us in that teaser is in Nyla. And then like all of a sudden we're just like, what? Everyone scramble. What does it mean?
So we'll leave it there. I think we've said what we want to say, and we have plenty of time to say more in the future. So what's happening after this? So this is pretty much the official end of the Arcane spree. We're going to go talk about, obviously, all of the new stories and bios that have come out, all the new stories that have come out as well. Um, I I don't think any comics came out. We have a book coming out. We're still thinking about it and figuring it out, so don't worry. Um, but yeah, there'll be more content related to this. We'll continue speculating about, because like we said, it says 2025. So there's the possibility we talk about this show this year. So we want to make sure we're preparing you all for that as well. But for the regulars, scheduled programming, because even though we've been doing this for 5 years, we're still not halfway. So there's plenty of characters we have. There's episodes we recorded before Arcane came out, so look forward to those hitting you about some other champions. And then there'll be new ones as well. So the content doesn't end because Riot keeps making money. So we'll be back soon. So thanks as always for listening. We'll be back soon with the next episode.
Yeah. Take care, everybody.